Hey folks, Quilly18 here, and welcome to another Unity UI drag and drop tutorial. In this video, we're going to be duplicating what I did in my little practice area over here, which is the ability to choose exactly where in a list you're going to drop something. It's a little trickier than what we've done so far, but not really that tricky. Let me go ahead and reopen the last project over here. I have lost it in my list. I am so not prepared. There we go. Here. Sorry, just working my other monitor. Yes, open. There we go. So currently, we have it set up. We can drag, but it doesn't give you that little cool placeholder effect. And no matter where I drop it, it always adds it to the end of the list. So we want to change things so that we can move it somewhere in the middle and have it show up there. So there's going to be a little bit more involved in this one, but I think the reward is going to be very, very worthwhile. So how is this all going to work? Well, basically, when we start to drag our object, the first thing we do is we remove ourselves from our parent, right? So we're in the hand. If we look at the list on the right over here, see the hand, I'm going to grab card 1 over here, which is the blue one. As soon as I start to drag it, it will remove itself from the hand parent, and it will just be parented directly to canvas. I think it'll be at the end of the list, sort of down here. Right there you can see the card is no longer parented. If I drop it back in here, I'll reparent it to hand, but by default, it always shows up at the end of the list over here. And it's this order that chooses how things are sorted in a grid. If I take this card in the inspector and I move it up to right there, it'll now be back in that second position, for example. You can move it up to the first position as well. There we go. But if I just drop it on hand itself, it shows up at the end. So how are we going to do some of this? Well, first things first, let's use a little placeholder. So when I pull the card out, I don't want the list to rearrange itself instantly. I want it to have a little gap where that card was. How are we going to do that? Well, it's actually not too hard. What we're going to do is we are going to create a dummy sort of placeholder object. Okay? I know I'm going to want to keep track of it. So let's go ahead and create a some sort of, what am I going to call this? I guess it's just going to be a game object, and the placeholder. We don't have to set it to null, but I'll make it explicit. Placeholder starts off as null. When we begin a drag, we're going to create a new object. So placeholder equals new game object. We're creating one completely from scratch. This is the same as saying create empty game object. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take this placeholder.transform.setParent. We're going to set it to this.transform.parent. We're going to set it to our old parent. Now, this by default will put it at the end of the list. Well, we're going to look into that real soon. It'll put it there. We also want to make sure that it basically behaves like the Unity UI system, right? So we're going to want to say placeholder. Well, the placeholder should have a rect transform. Let me think about this for just a second. The placeholder should have a rect transform, and what we want to do is we want to set the height and width of it to match my thing completely. There we go. I hope that makes some sense. So in our placeholder, we're going to have to do a little bit of work, but we're going to be okay. Actually, I guess all we need to do is add a layout element, right? The reason in the grid our cards stay the size that they are is because they have a layout element with the width and height. So all we want to do in our placeholder that we have now parented to our hand, we're going to want to say layout element y. Oh, we need to make sure to include the Unity UI system in here. There we go. So now we should have access to the class called layout element. There we are, and we do. We'll call it LE. And placeholder dot add component layout element. All right, so by doing this, the placeholder now has a layout element added to it, and we've grabbed a copy of it. Add component always returns the new component. So we've added a layout element to our placeholder, and we've grabbed a copy of it. Then we're simply going to go dot preferred width is equal to, say, this dot get component layout element dot preferred width. We're just going to copy, parentheses dot preferred width. We're going to duplicate this and do the same thing for height. so. And then we've got to do the same thing for flexible width is not flexible. Flexible height turned off as well. All right, if we do this, this will add the placeholder element to our list. Let's just use this as is and see exactly what happens. Let's make sure there's no errors, okay? We're going to hit play. I'm going to grab the blue thing, and then I'm going to just drop it in here. Oh, I'm a bit of a goof. It's because I have every time I start a new video, I make a duplicate of the folder. I'm editing the wrong one. So let me just copy this whole thing, close all of this. Oops, this is particularly bad. Open the correct draggable script. I was editing the wrong file. Paste. There we go. And embiggen. All right, now we hit play. It should work. My apologies. There we go. And I'm going to just drop it back down here. And we can see we created a new game object. It's right here. It's got everything set. It's taken up all the space that a card would, although obviously it's invisible. The same thing will happen here. I'm going to pull out the green card. You can see already there's a new object over here. That's why everything's sort of shuffled over. If I just drop it anywhere in here, we can quite clearly see every time I start to drag, it creates one of these placeholder objects. Okay. All right, that's not bad. A couple of things, obviously. When we stop our drag, clearly we're going to want to destroy that placeholder. Destroy placeholder. There we go. So now it won't clutter up things with an unlimited amount of placeholders. So again, when I grab this, actually I'll grab the yellow one, because what's nice is the placeholder will be exactly at the end of the list. It'll be where the yellow card is. So none of these will move. There we go, because there's a placeholder there. But now when I release this, it'll destroy the placeholder and everything is good. So here it'll shuffle a little bit. There's an invisible placeholder over there. If I let go, okay, that's pretty good. But we don't want the placeholder to always be at the end of the list. We want it to be where we grab the card out of. So how do we do that? Really, really easy. The placeholder.transform has something called set sibling index. This number is the order of the siblings within a parent. So if we set the sibling index to be the same as this.transform.get sibling index, it should be exactly where my card was. So let me pull out the blue card. Bam! Look at that. And then if I drop it, it'll clean itself up. My Black Lotus is still going to the end, but my placeholder is showing up where I grabbed the card out of. Same thing actually works up top here because they're the same script. There we go. I like that. That's pretty good. Okay, we're getting there. What's the next step? Well, the next step is when we drop the object, what if it goes back to where the placeholder is? All right, so the placeholder is here. When I drop it, instead of showing up at the end of the list, what if it just puts it back to where it was? Obviously, that's not going to apply here necessarily. Let's try that. How would that work? Well, let's look. When we end drag, we set our parent back to the hand. Well, let's say we copy this set parent here. So, or not set parent, set sibling index. After we've reparented ourselves, let's say this.transform.set sibling index to wherever our placeholder.transform.get sibling index is. This should put us back right to where our placeholder was. Let's try it. All right, so if I pull out the Black Lotus, and if I make sure to drop myself on the hand, this Black Lotus should actually go back right over there. And it does. Because it's putting itself wherever the placeholder was sitting. All right. Now the next trick is, when I take this Black Lotus and I move it over here, wouldn't it be nice if the placeholder and the green card moved? So if the green card was now here and the placeholder was here, so that if I drop this blue card, I would end up there. Can we do that? Sure, of course we can. Easy. This is during our drag. While we're dragging around, let's keep making adjustments to where the placeholder should be. So where should the placeholder be? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to loop through all the children of this parent over here. And we're going to check if the card that we're dragging around, if the card that we're dragging down is further to the left of the leftmost card, let's say, right? So this pink card, if I take this blue card and I drag it to the left of the pink card, then the placeholder should then move over. Does that make sense? I think that's relatively clear. So how do we check that? Well, each one of these objects has an x and a y coordinate. It's only the x that we care about here. If the x coordinate of the card I'm dragging is less than the x coordinate of a card and a parent, then my placeholder should be to the left of that. Make sense? I think it will. Let's do a loop. For int I equals 0, I is less than, now what are we looking at? Well, it's going to be this parent to return to that we're working on. So this parent that we're returning to has a child count. So we're going to loop through every single child once. Starting from the leftmost one, the zeroth child is on the left. So if my x is less than the x of parent to return to dot get child I, this is a transform dot position dot x. If my x position is less than the position of this child, then what we're going to do is we're going to take our placeholder and we're going to set its sibling, placeholder.transform.set sibling index. We're going to set it to I, which is going to make the placeholder be here. And then we're just going to stop. We're starting from the left. If we're, again, in the example here, if we've dragged this black lotus and we're to the left of this red one, and we've moved the placeholder there, well, we can stop. We don't have to keep looking. Well, obviously, we're going to be to the left of everything. So that's why we start with the leftmost one. As soon as we find one that we are to the left of, then that's good enough. So we move the placeholder, and then we just stop. We just stop this loop with maybe a break. This break will stop this loop. Let's see what that looks like. It might be working. Grab this. It's almost there. It's a little twitchier than I thought. But right here, we are to the left of that red card. In fact, as soon as our middle point, because of the way that our anchors are, as soon as our middle point goes to the left of that red card, it works. That's good. Now, it's not quite working in that direction. It's working here, but not here. Why is that? Well, if we think about it logically, or it is working, it's just not working the way we'd think, right? So as soon as I move to the left of the red card, my placeholder goes there. But what happens when I move slightly to the right? Well, what's happening is the placeholder itself is one of the children of this array, right? So when I move to the right, first thing that happens is we check that first object, which is the placeholder, this placeholder. Am I to the left of that placeholder card? Well, I no longer am. As soon as I move to the right, I'm no longer to the left of the placeholder card. And then it checks the next card, which is the pink one. Am I to the left of the pink card? And it says yes. So it puts the placeholder where that pink card was. But it's not actually what we're looking for. We sort of want to ignore the placeholder in this list. There's probably another way to logic it up. But what I'm going to say is what? How do I want to say this? How do I want to work this? Well, actually, I want to make a couple of adjustments because one of the things I believe... Oh, no, we still can put it here, right, because it's not anywhere. We sort of want to move it like one further to the left. But only if the sibling is there. Okay, here's what I'm saying. I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe this. I always say if you can't explain something in a sentence because you don't truly understand it. So I'm making sure that I've got it clear in my head. And the feeling is I'm sure there's some way for me to do this a little bit cleaner, but I don't have it. We're going to create a placeholder just to be super explicit. This is going to be the new sibling index placeholder. The value, I don't know. It's going to default to, I don't know, whatever it currently is, right? Placeholder dot transform dot get sibling index. We'll have a default to whatever it is now. So instead of sending it directly, we're going to set new sibling index to be I. If our placeholder is actually already to the left of this new sibling index, we're going to just bring the new sibling index down by 1. Just basically, we're sort of ignoring the placeholder in the list. Then after we're done doing this whole loop, we're going to make sure at this point to set placeholder.transform.set sibling index to the new sibling index. So that should improve one of the behaviors. There's still going to be one thing sort of off. So now I move to the left of the red, it's there, but now it doesn't instantly jerk the red back. It doesn't jerk it back until I'm in here. There we go. That's feeling exactly the way it should work. However, it will not go here. And the reason for it is because the placeholder is sort of always going to be to our left. That's why I'm like, I'm sure there's another way to arrange this. Maybe I should be going from right to left or something. Anyway, what does this all mean? Well, when I'm here, I'm obviously not to the left of everything. So if we check the loop, we loop through everything, and at no point are we to the left of everything. So instead of defaulting to wherever we were before, what we can just default to is the parent to return to dot child count or something. We're going to assume that we want to end up on the rightmost spot. And then we're going to check to see if we should actually just be to the left of everything. If we do this, we now have the placeholder going exactly where we imagine it might want to. And we can drop our card wherever we want. Look at that. Works pretty good. Now, what this won't do, you'll notice I've only been dragging around in the hand at this point. The reason is, if I were to drag this to the tabletop, it wouldn't quite behave the way we want. And the reason is, the placeholder stays in that initial list. And then if I drop it here, like, okay, now there's placeholders here, because the placeholder only gets assigned to the parent of our initial drop, right? We probably want to move that placeholder to whatever the array that we're actually hovering over, right? So we probably want to have that move to down here instead. I think that would make the most sense. Now, it's still sort of working with the drop just because it's using whatever index. Like if I grab here and I move it here, it's going to be dropping in the 0th spot, right? Because the placeholder child index is 0. So even if I go up here, it's still going to be dropping in the 0th spot. So it sort of works. And if I go here, it's going to be dropping in the 1 spot, which actually does put it between these two cards. But if I actually go here, if I have it right here, this blue card is going to end up between the 2 white ones, even though logically it doesn't really make sense. So what we want to do is our placeholder, when we mouse over, when we enter a new drop zone, we want to move the placeholder to the new drop zone. And hey, we can do that. That's not going to be so bad. In our drop zone, we have a function that responds when a pointer enters it. So when our pointer enters a drop zone, what if we take this placeholder and move it? In fact, this parent to return to, we're changing the parent to return to once we drop. We don't have to do that. Instead of waiting until we drop, what if we just change the parent every time we go into it? There's a bit of an issue with that. The issue with that is we could enter a zone, which does make sense to update the parent to return to when we enter the zone, right? It's like, okay, we'll enter it from here. And then, yes, this is the drop zone. And then we go back down here and like, yeah, sure, we'll enter down here. That works fine. But what happens when I drag it out here? Well, it'll just remember the last zone I was in, which in this case would be the tabletop, which doesn't make sense. If I'm dragging it out of my hand and I go here to this sort of invalid location or off to the edge of the screen and then I release it, I actually want it to bounce back to my hand, not here. So what I think we need is a placeholder. So we've got the parent to return to. But what we can have is something like, what if we have some, just call it placeholder parent. Right? Let's make the placeholder public as well. We don't necessarily need to do that. Hold on. So in our drop zone, instead of changing the parent to return to, let's only change the parent to return to if we actually drop somewhere legal. But in onPointer enter, we want to set not parent to return to, but the placeholder parent. We're going to set placeholder parent to this transform. And when we exit legal zone, let's set the placeholder parent back to what? Well, I guess to parent to return to. That might be the most logical. We should only do it. Okay, we're going to set the placeholder parent. If we leave a drop zone, we're going to set the placeholder parent back to the parent to return to, which by default normally will be wherever we started from. But let's only do that if the placeholder parent is equal to us. Just because we don't want any kind of weirdness where we're sort of leaving the zone, but we're technically supposed to be in another one. If placeholder parent is equal to this.transform, then we'll set it back to parent to return to. Otherwise, someone else has already sort of stolen the placeholder parent, so we're just going to ignore it. All right. And then in Draggable, when we do the onDrag here, instead of using parent to return to, we're going to use placeholder parent. So it's going to be placeholder parent, because we're just moving the placeholder. Placeholder parent there, and there. And that should work. And we want to make sure this defaults to this. I can still see a couple of error cases, but mostly this is going to work out the way we want, I think. Let's find out. Sure there's no errors. We're going to hit play. Start. Oh. When we're doing the on enter. Pointer drag is null. If pointer drag equals null, then just get out right away. Same thing on the exit. We don't want to do anything. If the pointer drag, if nothing is being dragged, we don't have any work to do. Okay, no errors. Good. Grab the Black Lotus. Mostly staying where it should be. Had like a little bit of weird thing as soon as I picked it up. Oh, no, it's not behaving quite right. Oh, it's moving to the left too quickly. Wasn't doing that before, was it? Hmm. I don't think it should be doing that. Placeholder parent, placeholder parent. If I do a parent to return to search over here, it doesn't show up anywhere in here. What am I doing that I'm not happy with? If it's less than that, new sibling index is this. If it's less than that, bring it down. Yeah, that's not right. Or is it? No, it feels like it's going too fast. I don't know. We'll make an adjustment. Again, there's some sort of flaw in my thinking about that loop that doesn't make it quite as sexy as it could be. Let's not worry about it. But if I move it up here, oh, I don't think the placeholder is actually being reparented. I think the parent changes. On pointer enter. Yeah. In our on drag, we're going to make sure that our if placeholder dot parent dot transform dot parent not equals the thing that's supposed to be the placeholder parent, then make sure to set it. Dot set parent placeholder parent. There we go. So now if I grab that Black Lotus and I pull it up here, there we go. So that seems to behave. And that moves a little too fast. The one on the left is fine. Well, this one is. I don't know. I'll have to make an adjustment somewhere along there. It's mostly okay, but it seems just not quite the behavior that I want. Oh. That's why. It's because I was checking. I did one extra copy and paste. Placeholders, sibling index. There we go. So it was working right before. Ah, so much better. That's exactly what I want. There we go. Feels very intuitive. Feels exactly the way we're looking for. So again, all this code will be available from my website, which should be linked down below. It's quill18.com / I don't know, Unity_tutorials or something like that. You can go and download everything there. Please feel free to leave comments with questions. I will try to do my best to answer them. You can also email me or reach me on Twitter at quill18 or quill18. My email is quill18@quill18.com. My Twitter is @quill18. And yeah, and again, as usual, if you do appreciate these tutorials. Oh, here's another thing that's worth noting. For outside of a droppable zone, you can see it just returns to my original position, which is great, which is exactly what we're looking to do. If we're outside of the original drop zone, of any sort of legal drop zone, it'll just put it back in my hand. But if I'm in a legal drop zone, it will do that. Gorgeous. Okay. Yes, and yeah, if you do enjoy this stuff, on the page where you can download things, there's also a bit of a tipping or donation system there. Really appreciate the support, so I can keep my Unity license going and keep making these videos, which don't get viewed quite as much as my normal gaming stuff. By the way, on youtube.com/quill18 is where I usually do Let's Plays of video games. So those get a lot more views, but I do enjoy making these programming tutorials a lot. So if you do like them, if you want to support the channel, please go ahead and do that. Might do a subbable at some point, but at the current time of making the video, I don't have anything of that sort. So anyway, hope this is a cool tutorial. I hope, especially in the last video where I talked about how you would apply this to a role-playing game, I hope you found that useful and relevant, and that you will use this to make awesome, awesome video games for me to play. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.